Alright fellas, now what's Jon Jones up to? Because it ain't looking like he's fighting anytime soon. Jones, the current undisputed heavyweight belt holder, recently seems to love taking big gaps in between his fights. His most recent fight happened in last November, and the fight before that in March of 2023. Does it look like he's going to fight anytime soon? Well, I think it's all a bit debatable. The bloke seemingly is on a borderline holiday at the moment over in Thailand and keeps throwing out mixed signals if he will actually return anytime soon. But what I want to try break down today is when can we actually see him return, what's the most likely outcome, and talk a bit about how weird of a situation this actually is. But just quickly, if you don't know, my name's Cloister and this channel is your one-stop shop for everything MMA, so make sure to subscribe and I'll always keep you in the loop. Now, this Jon Jones situation is a bit fascinating. I don't think there's been many examples of the UFC giving so much leeway to a fighter. Talk about Dana White privilege, I don't think there's been much of a bigger example than Jon Jones currently. Jones has kept the heavyweight belt tied in almost limbo for a good couple years now, keeping it away from the true young talent of the division, with the most clear example of that being Tom Aspinall. Although, to give a little bit of context, that rivalry between Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall has evolved into one of the biggest sagas in recent UFC heavyweight history, marked by delays, public spats, and just growing frustration. Now, Tom Aspinall has had a pretty solid rise. His rise to becoming interim heavyweight champion, of course, began with his swift knockout of Sergey Pavlovich in November of 23. He followed this up with a successful defense against Curtis Blade in July of last year. But despite all of these achievements, a unification bout with Jones has remained elusive. Now, Jones of course picked up that heavyweight title after defeating Cyril Gane back in March of 23, and he's defended it only one time against Stipe in November of last year. Since then, he's been inactive, while of course recovering from injury. And Jones has shown little urgency at all to face Aspinall, instead expressing interest in supposed legacy fights such as that potential matchup with Alex Pereira. Everyone's pretty much confused by Jones's constantly changing stance. He's hinted at retirement, he's claimed that he's already communicated his plans with the UFC, which the organisation's yet to disclose. The lack of clarity has left Aspinall just in limbo. He's held the interim title now for over 500 days without a unification fight. That set a UFC record, and the tension has then spilled into many public exchanges, with most recently Jones dismissing Aspinall's frustrations and telling him to shut up and do what you're told. Conor McGregor style. Although the difference is, when Conor was saying that, he was pretty much washed and talking to Michael Chandler, not speaking to the interim champ who's waited a record amount of time for his shot. And it's kind of sad, for the most part Aspinall remained mainly respectful, but he's grown increasingly vocal, accusing Jones of ducking the fight and calling for the UFC to take action, citing that it's all getting a bit ridiculous. But despite Dana White's assurances that a unification bout will happen sometime this year, the ongoing uncertainty continues to cast a shadow over the heavyweight division. With Tom Aspinall waiting this record amount of time, you have to question why the UFC has allowed this to happen. Now, the UFC and Dana White have historically been vocal and sometimes aggressive when champions have delayed defending their titles. This could be due to injuries, negotiations, or whatever personal reasons might happen, especially when it creates a bottleneck like this in a division. For the most part, Jon Jones holding onto the belt during this extended recovery has been accepted without really any backlash from Dana White, but this hasn't always been the case for others. One of the most well-known examples is Conor McGregor, who won the featherweight title in December of 2015 and then refused to defend it, instead chasing super fights. Dana White and the UFC then eventually stripped him of this featherweight belt in late 2016 due to inactivity. White justified the move saying you can't tie up the division. And McGregor was also stripped of his lightweight belt in 2018 under similar circumstances. These actions were framed as necessary to keep divisions active and fair. Georges St-Pierre was another high-profile example. After defeating Bisping to win the middleweight title in 2017, he almost immediately vacated the belt, citing health issues and his unwillingness to hold up the division. Previously, Dana White had warned GSP if he didn't commit to defending, he'd strip him of the title, and that's why he gave it up within weeks. While for Jones in comparison, he hasn't been warned like Georges St-Pierre was. He's been basically allowed to take the belt hostage with no guarantee he will actually ever fight again. Now, in terms of defending, he really only has one option, and that's Aspinall. He's the interim champ. If he doesn't go with him, give up the belt, because the interim champ deserves a shot. He can't even claim he wants to fight Alex Pereira after his loss. There's really only one choice. On a surface level though, what could Aspinall bring that would worry Jones? Well, his striking is pretty good. It's characterized by rapid combinations and precise timing. This could potentially disrupt Jones's rhythm and make it challenging for him to control the pace of the fight. Additionally, he's pretty good at jiu-jitsu and wrestling, and it provides him a pretty well-rounded skill set, allowing him to compete both on the feet and the ground with no worries. Furthermore, and debatably more important, Aspinall's youth and athleticism may give him the edge in terms of endurance and recovery, potentially allowing him to maintain a way higher pace than Jones throughout the bout. This could test Jones's conditioning and adaptability, especially as Jones is only getting older and has had limited ring time over the last few years. But at the end of the day, is this fight going to happen? Well, probably. You would have to assume the UFC would have to have a vague plan of what's going to happen. If they knew Jones was going to retire, would they allow him to hold the belt? Probably not. Jones has most likely said to the UFC that he wants to keep on fighting, but the issue that probably has plagued negotiations is money. At a guess, I would assume Jon Jones wants mega money for this fight. It's a test he doesn't need for his legacy, and if he was to take it, he would want to be paid for it. Although this fight is massive for us UFC fans, and it's definitely one of the biggest fights you could currently make in the sport, is it a genuine mega fight? Money-wise, I'm not so certain. I think it does incredibly well, but if Jones is asking for 30 plus M's, does it do well enough to justify that price tag? I'm not so sure, and I would assume negotiations are currently in late stages. I just can't see Dana letting Jones hold the belt for this long if there was nothing going on behind the scenes. As negotiations have been ongoing, Jones is of course doing things to fill time, like going on that Russian Ultimate Fighter show in Thailand. That kind of fuels speculation surrounding what's truly happening, but most likely there are just tense negotiations going on, which for how long they've been going on for, you would have to assume that they must be close to completion. But who knows, maybe they're not close to completion. Jones is that much of an erratic character, I wouldn't be surprised if all of a sudden he drops negotiations and decides to retire. Yet seeing that all the voices other than Jones seem to have been committed to this fight and all seem to be preaching the same sort of narrative, I reckon we'll probably see this fight close to year's end. But anyways, I now want to hear what you think. Do you think we're going to see Jones versus Aspinall anytime soon? Will Jones retire? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to like and subscribe. It really does a ton to help the channel. Yet, thanks for watching fellas, and I'll catch you in the next one.